Hello guys, welcome to another session. So in this video, we are going to discuss three important editorials of December 12th. Okay. So we are going to discuss these three issues that reflect deep changes in society, governance, and the global power structure. The first one is related to Australia banning social media for children below 16. And then the second one is the rising cost of education in India when a constitutional right slowly becoming a privilege, and the new national security strategy for the United States also, and what that actually tells us about the future world order. So these are the three topics that we'll be discussing. In fact, all the three are connected one way or the other. So who bears the responsibility, the individual or the state or the powerful institutions, all these we'll be looking into. So let's start with the first one, Australia's social media ban for children below 16, right? Is that a global turning point? What exactly has Australia done? See, for years, the internet was treated like an open playground. Anyone could enter, anyone can create account, maybe just by using a phone number, and then can consume the content. But now Australia have very clearly stated enough is enough, and Australia have become the first country in the world to legally fix a minimum age of 16 years for accessing major social media platforms. So the law is called the Online Safety Amendment Act. That's the social media minimum age, right? And under this law, you'll be seeing that children below 16 years cannot access certain platforms like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, Reddit, Twitch, even YouTube. And this is not a request to platform. This is a binding legal order. Right. Now the question is, who's responsible, the child or the company? This is most important design of the law. See, children are not punished here. Parents are not punished here. The platforms will be punished. If a 14-year-old secretly create an account, then police will not catch the child. Police will not catch the parents. The company will be fined for that. And the penalty can go up to $33 million, which is around 280 crore if you convert that in Indian rupees. And that clearly establishes the liability is on the platform. So the platform liability. Now, why was YouTube first exempted and then they have also banned? See, initially YouTube was exempted because it hosts educational videos, right? And the tutorials and the learning content and everything. But by July 2025, Australia observed something very disturbing. Children were learning less and they were falling into, algorithmic traps, and educational intent was being overtaken by this addictive recommendation. So I hope you know that YouTube work on the principle of, this algorithm is there. So when you search something and then they will understand your interest, and based on that, the recommendations will come. So it's not actually used for learning purpose, rather, based on your interest, they're showing something different. And therefore, on December 10th, last day, YouTube was also brought under the ban. Now, the question is which platforms are exempted, right? Not everything is banned. There are exemptions that include, messaging platforms like WhatsApp, direct encrypted communication, and certain gaming platforms like Fortnite, Roblox. It's not necessary that you need to know all these names, but I'm just telling you, very important for mains and interview and ethics also, not much for prelims. And then educational platform like the Google Classroom, and then the AI chatbots, like these are monitored but not fully banned yet. And that shows the law is selective and it's not completely a blind or blanket ban on social media. Right now, what is the core logic here? The persuasive design. See, Australia's strongest justification is, social media is not neutral. That's most important point that we need to take into consideration. It's built on persuasive design. So what the platforms do is they hire the psychologist, and in infinite scroll that ensures content never ends, and the likes and comments that trigger the dopamine release. And addiction is not accidental, it is something which is intentional. And the government data is also showing, over half of Australians, they face cyberbullying, and there are instances of rising anxiety, instances of depression, and eating disorders also. So increase in online grooming and stalking on children is also you can observe. So all these are because of this social media addiction. And the logic used is very simple here. We restrict alcohol by age, right? We restrict driving by age because they are dangerous. Alcohol also, there is an age-wise restriction. Driving license, if you need to get, you need to qualify certain age because they are dangerous. Same way, social media, if it goes unregulated, it is equally dangerous for children. So that's why this regulation is required. That's the logic. And there are arguments against also. We'll be discussing few arguments against. There are four major objections which are raised in this context. First, that's the privacy concern. Because, when you are looking for age related ban, so age verification is required. So when age verification means that may require ID proofs. So there is a risk of surveillance. That's a privacy concern. Then the dark web argument is also there. Children may move to unsafe, unregulated platform when these are not available to them directly. And the third one is parental authority argument, especially when it comes to YouTube. The parental control tools already exist, right? The laws shift the control from parents to the states now. So that parental authority argument is also there. And then finally, this one, human rights argument. See, does a 15-year-old not have the right to know the global issues through these platforms? So despite the protest, see, companies are complying because they cannot afford to lose Australian market. So there are no other option. You have to comply with the government order. Okay. Now let's compare the different models, Australia versus India. So what is Australian model now? Blanket ban below 16. And I told you there are exemptions also. And the liabilities on whom? It's the platform liability and hard enforcement. When it comes to India's model, this DPDP Act of 2023, child is defined as below 18. There is no blanket ban, and verifiable parental consent is there, and no targeted advertising to children. These are the important difference that you need to understand. Now, when it comes to India, what is the biggest challenge? The population is 140 crore. So verifying, the parental consent at a scale which is extremely difficult. That's one of the challenge also. So see, this is an experiment, right? That will become a global case study. Let's see what is going to happen in Australia. So there are benefits, the better mental health, and that will reduce the cyberbullying, grooming, and less screen time. And the challenges also there, VPN use and dark webs and other things, and the enforcement difficulties are also there. So see, if technology created the problem, and technology, not the blind bans alone, must be part of the solution. So use technology somehow to give a proper solution to this. That's how it should be done. Now, coming to the next one, education in India, from right to privilege, right? So what is a constitutional vision and the ground reality? Article 21A, that's, this 86th constitutional amendment, 2002, right? And what is that? It is about free and compulsory education for children between 6 to 14. And this NEP 2020 that expanded the vision, to like age 3 to 18. So, and the vision is basically universalization of education by 2030. So on paper, if you look at it, everything is looking cool and perfect. But on the ground, the reality, it's deeply unequal. So what does the data says? Let's look at NSSO 80th round. That's the latest data, April, June 2025. 55.9% students in government schools, 11.3% in private aided school, 31.9% in private unaided school. So this is the data. Now there are rural-urban divide also. If you look at rural, only 24.3 in private schools, urban 51.4 in private school. So there is a clear conclusion that you can draw from here. Parents are leaving the government school. There is a shift. And this is called flight for quality. Remember this term, and in essay, in interview, ethics, in paper one, Indian society areas, these are very important. So flight for quality. You are shifting from government school to the private school. So what does that mean? The government school, the quality is coming down or not? Right? We need to discuss upon that. Now there is a cost burden here, right? Annual average private school fees, if you see, when it comes to rural, it comes around 18,000 to 33,000, urban 26,000 to 50,000, 49,000 also. And that's a monthly expense of on an average 2,100 to 4,000, 2,100 to 4,000, sorry. So see, you can see here pre-primary private school fees is almost equal to monthly income of the poorest 5 household, right? And this is called this financial exclusion. Education become accessible only to those with money. That's against the spirit of Article 21A, right? Now there is a coaching trap that we need to discuss, the shadow education. You pay the school fees. Even after paying the school fees, 25.5% rural children take tuition. separate. 30.7% of urban children take tuition. And by class 12, 44.6% urban students depend on coaching, right? This entrance and other things. So that create double financial burden. And there are research which is showing that tuition dependency is negatively associated with the school quality. If schools were effective, tuitions wouldn't be needed, right? So that's what you mean by that. The tuition dependency is negatively associated with school quality. So if schools are not effective, you need tuition. Now, what are the consequences? So this lead to intergenerational inequality. So a rich child go to good school, get good coaching and good job. Poor child go to weak school and limited mobility option, right? So if you need to have social mobility or better life chances in the future, you need better education, better opportunity. So a rich child can go to a good school that way and then go to coaching, good job also you will get, good education, but that's not the case with the avenue for social mobility. So it is education that is actually missing for the poor child, and commodification of education. Education is shifting from public good to a market product. It's not a new scenario. It has been there before also, much before also, but still that is getting, at its peak form these days. And then social division, schools becoming the class markers. Now, the class division, that is what I mean to say. Now, what are the solution? You need to strengthen the government schools, both infrastructure and the trust, right? Parents need to have the trust. Otherwise, even if they see the parents, they think that they are suffered a lot. They don't want their children to suffer. So they want to send them to good schools, irrespective of what job they have. So they may work hard or whatever they have, they spend on the education. So that, if the government school improving infrastructure and quality and also building the trust, it is good for the parents also, the students also. And you need to regulate the private school fees as well. Now, there is no such regulation. Different schools will charge at different levels. And you need to improve the teacher quality and the salaries, and then reduce dependency on coaching. For example, Delhi government schools, right? Now, see, what I can tell you is there is a statement which is given by Nelson Mandela. Education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. But think about this. If only the rich possess this weapon, then the world becomes more divided, not better. Inequality will increase more. It is not going to reduce. And education must remain a right, and it should not be a privilege. It's actually a right, right? Article 21A that must be strengthened in practice, not just in terms of text. So that's about the second one. Now let's look at the third article, third editorial, that is related to USA's national security strategy. So that's related to the national security. Now, why should India care? See, the US is still the most powerful country, no doubt, no question. And when it realizes its national security strategy, what does that reveal? Right? So it have just released the national security strategy. It is revealing how it sees the world and who it trusts and who it pressures. So that's the national security strategy basically reveal the three important points: how it sees the world, rest of the world, who it trusts and who it pressures. So what is national security strategy is all about? Under the Goldwater-Nichols Act 1986, US President must present national security strategy to Congress. It's not a document, it's a grand strategy. So the term national security is used sarcastically, right? Is this real security or just imagination? That's what national. Okay. Now, the core paradox here is the US want global dominance, but less global responsibility. They want to take the dominance, but with less responsibility. This is contradictory. So when you talk about dominance, you need to take the responsibility also. So dominance require involvement, and isolation basically weaken your influence. So that approach is what called as transactional realism. What does that mean? I want power, but I don't want to pay for everyone's security. So remember this term, transactional realism. Now, let's also discuss the 5 important pillars of the strategy here. So first one, end of mass migration. The borders tightened, driven by domestic populism and attack on globalization. Second one is related to the protection of core rights, the conservative values exported via foreign policy, cultural wars which are going global, and then Atlas syndrome. US no longer wants to carry the world's burden. retrenchment without surrendering the power. Don't want to take responsibility, but want the dominance and the power. Then coming to the peace deals, example, this Abraham Accord. See, it's less about peace, more about influence projection. Now coming to economic security, which is equal to national security, there are issues related to trade deficit, supply chain, decoupling from China, domestic manufacturing, energy expansion, support to Wall Street and crypto. All these are coming under that dimension. They're targeting the allies and not enemies. So this strategy basically criticizing the Europe and Germany's political instability, NATO burden sharing. And what is Germany's response? Germany's response is like, we don't need lectures on freedom. So what is that signal? That signal, there is a potential crack within NATO. What is the implication for India? See, the greater strategic autonomy is required, right? And issue-based alignment is what we are looking for, and we don't want any blind loyalty. Opportunities in supply chain diversification and caution in India-Russia relation. So, guys, these are the three editorials which I want to discuss: the children versus tech giants, students versus education markets, allies versus global powers. So, powers must be regulated. It must be regulated. Responsibility must be fixed, and the rights must be protected with realism. So that's the essence of governance, and that's exactly what UPSC want you to understand also. So that's about the session. Thank you so much. I hope you got some value from this. If you're looking for any mentorship or classes or test series, get in touch with us. See you there.